Welcome to Nighttime Conversations with Steve and Freja, where we take on the deeper subjects of relationships, life, love, sex, and personal happiness. I'm your host, Freja Norden. Remember to like and subscribe. Kaz Riley is an award-winning and leading hypnotist, hypnotherapist, and hypnosis trainer with an international reputation for excellence in client work and her specialist training and mentoring program for hypnotherapists. Kaz works with a wide range of issues that include anxiety, IBS, fertility, childbirth, trauma, and PTSD. Kaz also has a specialism in sexuality, sexual dysfunction, sexual freedom, is kink-friendly and LGBT-friendly. She's regularly called upon as a consulting hypnotherapist for national women's and health magazines, online health articles, and on radio and TV. She also has her own show on the Hypnosis 24/7 network called Trancing in the Sheets. I have about 4 more paragraphs of clinical qualifications here for Kaz Riley, but what I will say is to take a look at KazRiley.com. That is www.KazRiley.com and see her magnificence for yourself. It is such an honor to be graced with Kaz's phenomenal knowledge and experience. Thank you for being with me tonight. Now, last week we agreed that we wanted to talk about vaginas and vulvas in relation to sex and really bring some information to light. So, what is vaginismus?
Okay, well, vaginismus is a condition or a state, if you like, where whenever a woman is or attempts to be penetrated or tries to penetrate herself, so that could be with a penis, a finger, a tampon, a toy, a dilator, the body just kind of clamps up. So literally nothing is going in there, and it can be extremely painful. But essentially, vaginismus is where penetration of anything is prevented by the vaginal muscles kind of clamping up, so nothing can penetrate. And it's something that if you look in the medical text, they'll tell you that it's rare. But I suspect from the amount of women that I see with this and work with that have this, is that actually it's very underreported. I think it's probably something that's much more common than than we know, simply because women don't talk about it or they don't seek help for it. They either find a workaround for it. I often see women that talk about their sex, which is anything but penetration. So they usually have great libidos and all that kind of stuff. But they just don't talk about it, or they just avoid relationships. A lot of women will tell me that they kind of, how can they have a relationship? How can they even enter a relationship when it's physically impossible to have sex? So that, in a nutshell, is what vaginismus is.
Okay. And I'm going to just say physically impossible to have penetration, because that's very different than being physically impossible to have sex. So how does that, so it's a muscle clamping that prevents penetration. And that's very different from other types of vulva or vaginal pain that women will report. How does this, and I would actually venture to say too, that a lot of women aren't taken seriously when they report it.
Absolutely.
If they say I have pain, they'll be told, well, just use lubrication. Just spend a little more time on foreplay and you'll be fine. And then out of embarrassment or shame or feeling dismissed, they won't go back to the doctor. Instead, they'll just avoid sex altogether.
Absolutely. And it's not just sex. I mean, even something like being able to use a tampon.
Yes.
For a lot of these women is really difficult. This it does have a real impact on female life, if you like. And they are, I mean, I've had women that have that, or just use more lube, try and relax. Just relax is the other one that I hear a lot that they've been told. I've had a few women that have been given numbing cream, which is just, I think that's barbaric. And then the other thing that women are often given are a set of dilators. That's often what's recommended to them from the psychosexual clinic, is they're given a set of dilators that start off smaller than the little finger right up to a fairly substantial kind of penis size and everything in between. And the idea being that, they start off with the small one and then somehow they kind of stretch out their muscles, which even that is just imagine stretching yourself out is a quite a difficult thing. Or just the thought of it is, if you've got fear of pain, you can imagine that just the idea of doing that. So what a lot of women do with those is they'll give it a whirl and then they go and they put them in the bedside drawer and then they forget about them, and they kind of don't get used. And what I say to a lot of women that have been given that, I was asked them about the context in which they've been asked to use them, and really they're just tried, they're told to try and relax and just insert them. But of course we know that certainly if you're thinking about being able to do this with the view to having sex, then there's a lot more to it than just being relaxed. The body's in various different states of arousal through that. So if you try and insert something, if any woman tries and insert something, we all know of, even things like going for smear tests, the pap smears for cervical cancer screening. If you've got something like that, it doesn't matter how hard you relax or how hard your gynecologist might try and insert speculum, it's not going to happen. And we know for all of us that can be quite an uncomfortable procedure, even if we don't have vaginismus. So, yeah, there we go. I'm going off one of my tangents, but yeah.
Well, you actually I was going to ask you later on about the dilators, as because that's a common thing that is prescribed, and unless you treat the underlying problem, which is causing the muscle spasms, the dilators aren't going to do anything. And another thing I wanted to throw in there is that a lot of women who have this problem also have issues of incontinence and problems related to their pelvic floor, because this is a spasm. This is not normal, and it's not normal for your muscles to be contracted so tightly. And our body is meant to be able to be flexible and for the muscles to work properly. And when they're spasming like that, they're not functioning properly, and that will affect your continence as well.
Absolutely.
And they're given, like, I know, for example, I know a friend who has severe incontinence. And she also has this vaginismus, and she's been given medication for her incontinence versus treating the muscle spasm. So it's a whole big spiral of Band-Aids over a problem, which is really psychologically based.
Absolutely, and it's probably worth kind of saying here as well, certainly when I was initially kind of taught about these things, and if you look in a lot of the kind of the medical texts, it often talks about people having had past abuse. And, thankfully, that isn't the case with vaginismus, actually. There are cases where it has been caused by past abuse, but actually majority of women that have this have had no sexual abuse in the past, but they have had things like a lot of shame. They've been told, I had one lady that really kind of sticks in my mind was she could orgasm, she could be penetrated by her finger or her partner's finger, but she couldn't have sex. And, when we did the work around that, it was because to have sex, she had to open her legs, and it had been drummed into her from being very young that, you don't open your legs. That was kind of the phrase that was said to her as she was leaving. Have a nice night, but don't open your legs. And that had really stuck with her. So she was even married, and every time she opened her legs, everything kind of tensed up so that she couldn't be penetrated. Another woman that I worked with, for her, it was not being able to say no. So with her kind of early relationships, there were boys really that were wanting to have sex with her, and she couldn't say no. So she deliberately clamped up her muscles at that point and kind of taught herself that conditioned response. And then other women that, when we dig a bit deeper, there's just so much shame and guilt and a real disconnection from their kind of sexual energy, from their vulva, from their clitoris, from that kind of whole feminine space, so that they're quite disconnected from it, and they're very ashamed about it. And, they have often kind of bad feelings about themselves as well and their bodies. And it just, every time they attempt penetration, it kind of gets reinforced because they're not able to, because they'll often say, I am relaxed, but actually they're not. They're telling themselves they're relaxed, which is an entirely different thing.
I've had similar experiences in terms of the beliefs that arise when we go and take a look at what's going on in their minds and in their emotions. A lot of times surfaced from teenage parental advice about sex and
teenage parental
fear. It was exactly it. It was fear mongering, and they knew that in order to be good, in order to keep their parents' love and to be a good girl, they had to avoid that thing, that awful thing, because only awful girls have sex and have penetration. And then later on, of course, when they're married and wanting to enjoy it with their husbands or with partners, they don't have to be married, but even within a completely different context, which to them is socially acceptable, they're still unable to enjoy it because they haven't given themselves their yes.
Yes.
So what can a woman do who is suffering from this and doesn't know how to feel better or even get started finding her body's comfort?
Well, I think first of all, it's remembering that we have to give ourselves the yes, both within our bodies and within our minds. It's not enough. If you've got vaginismus, just to within your mind, give yourself a yes within your mind. The body has to follow with that. So we have to make friends with our bodies. These women really need to make friends with their bodies. And that doesn't mean that they just need to get the dilators in there. They need to learn how their bodies respond. They need to learn how that they can influence the tension within their muscles, within their pelvic floor, down their vaginal canal, all of those things. So really we start off usually with getting rid of, well, two things actually. One is a big process of re-education, understanding what the muscles actually do and how they work. And it's much easier to overcome something if you understand that. We're not taught that. We're taught at school with our sex education that our clitoris is this tiny little button, and that the kind of the vaginal canal is just kind of this long tunnel that's very smooth, doesn't it's just kind of a receptacle for a penis, if you like, and that's not the case at all. So often that's where we start with that re-education, and then taking any shame away and around of that, and then getting women really comfortable with the fact that they have a vagina and how amazing it is and all the wonderful things that it does and the power that it holds, so that they can start to kind of connect with that energy and that power and those muscles, and do that in the absence of shame and guilt. Because often women that kind of have these issues, not always, but often even have things, kind of issues around masturbation and things like that. They're so disconnected from, they feel kind of let down by the vagina almost. So that's normally where I start, is with that kind of re-education, helping a woman understand what her body is like, what it actually is like, how it kind of works. And then kind of associate, getting rid of the shame and starting to associate in control and pleasure, and also a kind of empowerment that even then, if she's able, once we've kind of gone through all of those things, we've got her where she needs to be, that she has choice. Just because you can doesn't mean that you have to. And that's a big one, I think.
Well, that's directly related to a lot of the cause, since we meaning women, especially younger women, they don't feel like they can say no and be okay with the masculine, the guy who's trying to have sex with them. He's going to be disappointed. He's going to be upset. He's not going to be able to do it. So her body says the no for her. And as adults, we can say no, even though our bodies can take a penis. We don't have to.
Yeah.
It's perfectly within our right to say no, even if you are married, even if he is turned on, even if he has an erection. And knowing that you can stand in your no allows your body to relax, because you're
Absolutely.
no longer afraid of having to do something that you don't really want to do.
Absolutely. And you know, if we can take away that fear, then, you know, the fear of what might happen if somebody says no, or the fear of what might happen if they are penetrated, because the fear is around there, this is going to hurt. And we know that, you know, we have that fear, tension, pain cycle. The more we fear something, the more we tense up, the more it hurts. Therefore, the more we fear it again. Is, you know, it's being able to kind of let go of that as well. Because, you know, I'm thinking, you know, of a young woman, an amazing young woman who, you know, I was working with towards the end of last year, professional dancer, who, you know, is kind of embarking on her sexual adventures, if you like, and had been avoiding any kind of relationship. But for her, the thing that kind of made the difference was, once we kind of got her over this and she could wear a tampon, it meant that, you know, she could say yes to going to any dance convention or competition that she wants. Because she didn't want to do that wearing a pad, because she felt dirty. That's how she described it. And she said, as she was walking down the street wearing a tampon for the first time, it was the first time she'd ever felt like a woman. And she's 20, you know, she's not a young girl. So it's interesting. And she felt very much that vaginismus was just something that older women had. And, you know, there's all these kind of misconceptions, you know, out there. But, you know, it has, even to how she was feeling about her monthly cycle, her periods, that became a bad thing. Interestingly, once we got rid of the vaginismus, her periods got better as well. A lot of she didn't bleed as heavily. She didn't have as much pain, which I find really interesting. And I'm sure it's because she kind of made friends, if you like, with that whole part of her life and all that, and that part of her, so that she was much more accepting of it. And, I think that has a massive impact physically, but also psychologically, about how we feel about ourselves.
What would you say to a woman, and actually every single woman that I've ever seen who has this problem has felt this way, or felt a degree of this, felt like her body is broken, or like she's less of a woman because she can't be penetrated?
It's I've never come across a woman with vaginismus that doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel that way. And what I tell them, and this isn't kind of me kind of making stuff up, I really believe this, is that it tells me that actually they have an amazingly strong mind-body connection.
Yes.
That, has been caught up in a negative. And actually that means for her that when we kind of get her to the place where we have that positive mind-body connection and that positive connection to being penetrated, then we know her mind will allow her at that point to have the most amazing sensual sexual experiences. It's not about being broken. It's actually, kind of almost a super clever way of her body protecting her. And we can just learn how to do that in a different way. So it's not about being broken, and it's certainly not about not being a woman. It's about having learned, through learning, how to kind of manage something that now has become something that's a problem. And we can unlearn things. It's very easy to unlearn. It's just kind of a faulty set of learning. So there's nothing broken. It's just something that that's something that needs to be relearned, if you like. And and it's liberating. I think if you walk around feeling that you're not a woman, I mean, that's a huge thing, isn't it? That you're a woman that can't have sex, could possibly never have a family, could never function properly in a relationship. I mean, these are the kinds of things that women that have vaginismus feel. And once we kind of take that burden off their shoulders, I think we're halfway there to helping them overcome their vaginismus in the first place. What do you tell them, Freya? What do you tell them?
Well, I was going to say exactly. That's a real identity issue.
Yeah.
And identities go deep. Well, I was going to say that their body is functioning perfectly according to what their mind and emotions are telling it. So it's not broken. It's actually just responding to what it's being told. And what it's being told is those unconscious programs in the mind saying, protect yourself, or whatever it is that their particular mind is directing the body to do. Mm-hmm. So that's not broken. No. That's actually a perfectly functioning body. And to reframe it, what's that?
Isn't it? That is awesome, because
it's amazing.
Yeah. When you think our minds and our bodies are capable of doing that, albeit with faulty information, but it just tells us what our body is capable of doing when it's got the right information.
That's a huge burden off of everything, when you're like, okay, well, actually, I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with my body. There's nothing wrong with me as a woman. I'm just telling my body the wrong things. So now I can change that. And Absolutely. Sometimes you need help to change it, and sometimes you don't. It just depends on the severity of your problem and how deep it goes, or how hidden it is from your conscious mind. If you can just tell yourself these things and do some self-exploration, you can often heal it yourself. And if not, you may need a little bit of help. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we often talk about, you and I both use hypnosis and amongst other things, to help women overcome vaginismus. But certainly, we often hear the analogy, don't we, of there's a glitch in the program and we just need to fix a glitch with the program. But I think most kind of sexual issues, especially for women, it's not that there's a glitch in the program, it's just that they've been given the wrong program.
Yes.
So if we give them the right information, then they start running the right program, and then obviously all is well. And I think it's not like there's a it's just like a little glitch, or just a bit of coding that's gone wrong. It's just that they didn't have the right information in the first place. And once you have the right information, then everything changes, doesn't it? We talk about knowledge is power, but even more so when it comes to women and their sexuality and their bodies. And we're taught, for goodness sake, they teach kids now even how to put a condom on, and yet girls are not taught how to use a tampon. They're just given the box and told to get on with it.
That's given the wrong program thing just made me laugh. When I was a kid, I never received I didn't receive anything about sexuality. It was just a mystery. And I grew up masturbating, and I never felt any guilt over it until, I don't know, somewhere in my teenage years, I began to feel very guilty, like I shouldn't be doing this thing. And I was very ashamed and very guilty. And every day I would promise myself I wouldn't do it, and I would do it, of course. And I felt terrible about it until I was about 17, and I read in a magazine, I think it was Red Book or Chatelaine, I don't know, one of those women's magazines, that you were supposed to masturbate, because then you knew what you liked. And that reading that one paragraph saying that you were supposed to masturbate, I was like, oh, great. And everything changed. I had no more guilt, and there were literally zero hangups. Yeah. And it was just being given that other frame of reference where touching myself or making myself orgasm was not this filthy, shameful thing. It was something I was supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
Great. And that was a minor example of the same thing. You just need a little bit of new information, and it can change everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So with this, how does this differ from other types of vaginal pains and problems? Because it's not the only type of thing that comes up. Pain during sex is something that almost seems ubiquitous with women. It's so common that people don't even address it or recognize it. Yeah, it's just par for the course. So what are some other types of things which are considered normal, but to people like you and I are totally unacceptable and unnecessary?
Well, there's so many things, isn't there? I mean, the I mean, just having pain when you're having sex is one of them, where you're, and feeling the pain, and again, just assuming that that's how it should be. And then the other one, of course, is lubrication. And, there's nothing wrong. Let me just say, there's nothing wrong with using a bit of lube here and there. And certainly, there's certain times hormonally where, women need help with that. But I think since lubes have become much more kind of available, for example, then what happens is people are using them too soon. So they're not actually ready. And, there's this kind of, it's this kind of thing of, women often feeling when they're having sex that actually what they're doing is preparing to be penetrated. And I think this kind of, and if you can imagine, if you've had painful sex, or if you've got vaginismus, if you don't lubricate well, or whatever it may be, and you feel that the whole process of your foreplay is to prepare to be penetrated.
What a horrible thought.
Then, it's just not going to float your boat, is it? It's not going to do it for you. So what often, so that's actually a big one. We talk about, lubrication, and it's also, well, here's some lube. And sometimes, yes, but most of the time it simply means that, a woman isn't having her needs met. And actually often if they are kind of having their needs met in terms of they're meeting their own needs as well, it's not about putting all this on their partner, be it male or female. This is about, allowing themselves to receive pleasure, to be aroused, to sit in their arousal and to enjoy it, to kind of really get into that space. And it's not just about their vaginal arousal even, some women, it's about that kind of full-bodied arousal. And, so there's so many other things, it could be things like pain after giving birth, for example, worries about giving birth, or worries having had given birth that things won't feel the same, or something might hurt if there's been some kind of injury. Another big one at the moment is that somehow their genitals just don't look right. Their labia is too long, it's too short, it's not the right color. There's so many things that can cause painful sex, often because people are just very tense about the whole thing. And there's so many things, but the really kind of common ones are kind of body dysmorphia around their genitals, lack of lubrication, which often is just not enough time, not enough of the right kind of foreplay. It's not just about, this kind of formulate, do this, do that, and away you go. And also just kind of where it is uncomfortable. And sometimes it could be about how your cervix is laying. It could be where you are in your cycle, whether your bladder's full or not. There's all kinds of things that can, whether you've got, a UTI, urinary tract infection, maybe you've got a thrush infection. There's all kinds of stuff that can cause different kinds of pain in sex. And it's something that shouldn't be ignored either, It shouldn't be ignored because it can be, thankfully rarely, but it can be a sign that there's a bigger issue there. So the idea that you kind of just grin and bear it is something that we shouldn't do. We should kind of get checked out by our doctors and then go from there, and see what it could be that's causing the pain. And, and it could be things like, even technique of a partner, there's all kinds of things, isn't there?
Well, something I noticed is that seems to be a real fear of adjusting what is happening to them. So rather than participating in a equal participation event, let's call it, the woman is engaged, or the woman has stuff happening to her by her partner. And there is, whatever the reasons are for this, whether it's because you don't see any of the details in porn. For example, you don't see people, stopping to go to the bathroom or stopping to readjust because this one position is actually really uncomfortable and it's causing my hamstring to cramp, so it doesn't feel good, or another position is going to stimulate my clitoris better. You don't see that in porn. It just kind of goes from one to the end.
Absolutely.
But in real life sex, it's not something that happens to you. And if a partner is playing with your breasts because it's supposed to arouse you, and it also arouses him to play with them. But playing with them is a little bit uncomfortable. It's up to you to speak up and to make sure that what he's doing is not only comfortable, so it's not hurting, because that hurts a lot of people. Actually, the way that they're touched can often be really painful. Adjust it so that it feels good, and make sure your partner is listening to you. And I think a lot of people are afraid of killing the mood by assisting their partner to change things so that it feels good. So there's foreplay pain. There's all kinds of things that can feel uncomfortable during foreplay, not just the breast, but most of the women that I don't know that dislike oral sex, they dislike it because they're very sensitive. They have sensitive clitoris, sensitive vulva, and their partners are just not being gentle enough. Yes. And this is more common than you might think.
Absolutely. Or you get the opposite end of the spectrum where whatever it's doing, they're just not feeling it. It's just not causing a sensation.
Yep.
So, so the box has been ticked, if you like, of, I don't know, breast play, for an example of this has occurred, therefore you must be aroused, when actually, like you're saying, it was uncomfortable, or it just, or the opposite sometimes. It just was, whatever the sensation was, it wasn't doing anything. Mm-hmm. So it's, it's on both sides, I guess, isn't it? But it's an interesting one. It's an interesting one with vaginismus, actually, because women that have vaginismus often have no issues with their arousal. They're often wet, they are aroused, they feel like they want it, but their body still closes up. And this is, it's not usually an arousal issue. It's an acceptance issue. Where they're often feeling that arousal in their bodies. They're very comfortable with their partners. Their partners are doing all the right things. The communication's there, and still their body won't allow
penetration
to occur. And that's why we have to dig a bit deeper, isn't it? It's not just about arousal. I know lots of women that I've worked with, even who can masturbate. They can masturbate with their external clitoris, they can orgasm, and yet still they can't. They're afraid almost to kind of have anything inside of them, and that includes their own fingers, which is where I encourage women to start, because they can feel it and they can feel what they're doing, and to kind of explore their body and to, kind of notice it opening up as well. When I say it, I mean their vaginal opening, but also to explore all around their vagina, because I know, and that, like the clitoral tissue, sits right around that vulvic opening. It's not just this little button. And it's about understanding how their body responds to touch in various ways, how they're what is it that allows them to kind of feel open, to be open to being penetrated, be that by a finger or a tampon or a penis or a tongue or a toy or whatever it may be.
That comfort level with the vagina and the vulva is really, really important. A lot of us never touch it unless we're wiping after the bathroom. Or maybe, putting a vibrator against the clitoris, or the clitoral, the end of the clitoris. And other than that, it's sort of, okay, well, that's not really where my fingers go. And they don't know the anatomy, and they don't know what it feels like in the different areas. So there's a lot of fear and mystery involved in vaginas and vulvas, the entire vulva.
Absolutely. I mean, I know when the amount of women I've had when, they've managed to get a finger in there, and they said, and then I found this ridge. I'm sure there's something that's wrong. And I was going to say, no, that is perfectly normal. I mean, I know this myself from, there was a time in my life where I thought the inside of my vagina was there something wrong with it? Is that how it should feel? And, I think I asked somebody, how, and then she was like, no, that's perfectly normal. That's fine. That's how it should be. Books. If you look on even the kind of period pamphlet, where you look on, the pamphlet within a box of tampons, for example, you look at all the information that you're given, it's called the vaginal canal, and it's shown as being this kind of smooth, almost receptive, kind of almost like sheath shaped, almost condom shaped kind of part of the body, and we're given the impression that it's there, that a penis will just gently slide in there and everything will fit perfectly. And of course it does, but it's not how we expect it to be. And if women don't explore how they feel inside and are able to do that without that kind of fear that there's something desperately wrong with them, it's a really interesting thing. I have a cushion that I use that is kind of on the inside of the cushion. You can insert your fingers in there and it actually feels like the inside of a vagina. It's just
that's cool.
Really pretty kind of cushion. And my clients that I have in the office, I get them to have a feel in there and they're like, oh, but there's that kind of like that round nodule. And I'm like, yes, this is all perfectly normal. This is how we feel inside, but we're not taught that.
No, we're not.
We're kind of almost taught, we're taught what a penis looks like, and we kind of make the assumption, don't we, that the inside of us must match the reverse of that.
Something you said earlier, I know I'm flipping
that's cool
quickly to the other subject, but you mentioned having some sort of body dysmorphia or being worried about the way that you look externally is somehow not correct or not good enough or not right. And I wanted to hop on there and say, if that's what's going on in your mind, your body is going to respond to that message that you are not okay. And when you have that fear that you're not okay, your body is going to respond to that fear in the way that your body naturally responds to fear. And that may be clamping or clenching up, or it may be simply shutting down, but certainly arousal is not going to come from that fear.
No. And, and just that kind of, there's that fear, but again, it's back to that being broken thing, isn't it? I don't look how I should look.
So if I know that you and I know this very well, but if wondering or criticizing your personal body, like your looks, while you're having sex is the wrong thing to do, what is the right thing or the correct thing to think while you're engaged in foreplay or in intercourse or in any kind of lovemaking that would improve your pleasure and improve your arousal versus negate it and shut your body down?
Well, this is it, isn't it? And it's actually, it goes a step back from that, doesn't it? Of what you think about your body when you're not having sex. And, how you feel about it. But also when you're in there, you're kind of in the midst of a sexual, sensual experience. And I know you and I, when we talk about sex, we're not just talking about penetration. We're talking about all the amazing stuff that goes on around that. It's that permission to receive pleasure again, isn't it? It's about being able to receive and to do that on your terms, to take responsibility for that, but also to know that you can say no. And I think that's the thing. If you're overcoming something like vaginismus and you've got a partner that's willing to kind of go through that process with you, then it's about being able to say no, and just kind of being able to kind of see yourself as a sensual sexual being that's able to have sex. Female bodies are built to have sex. When you think about, and our pleasure actually, I think it's such a powerful thing when we talk about, the tip of the penis, for example, has 3,000 nerve endings. The tip of the clitoris has 8,000 nerve endings, where we are built to receive pleasure. And, it's about being able to kind of get into that mindset and to kind of, to help women to take control of those muscles as well, to know that they can relax them, to know that they can feel that energy, to be in that energy, to share that energy even. It's a powerful energy, isn't it?
Very powerful. What I would add to that is we have different lenses through which we can view things. And women who view themselves negatively sexually they have created, or they've learned it from other people, but they've created this lens, which is a very critical, negative lens through which to view their body. And it usually has some sort of unrealistic or pornographic airbrushed standard. And when they look at themselves through that lens, they think, I don't measure up to this. There must be something wrong with me. And that lens exists for them. So we can't say it doesn't exist. It exists for them. They made it up. They've looked through it and they've come to these conclusions. But there's another lens that you can look through yourself. And that lens is what you were talking about. I have this magnificent body, which is capable of so much pleasure. And when you're looking at your body through that lens, now you can focus on the things that your body is feeling instead of some arbitrary idea or concept of what your body looks like. So now it's, what does this feel like? How much better can this feel? How erotic is this? And it's this really, really big permission slip to feel pleasure instead of a reason why you can't feel pleasure or shouldn't be feeling pleasure. The reason being, well, I don't look good enough to have a good time sexually. Now the reason is, wow, I have this body that is built for pleasure and arousal. How wonderful is that? What else can I feel? And you kind of explore down that route through that lens instead of through the critical lens.
Absolutely. And, women that have vaginismus, of course, their lens is very critical. It's back to, I'm broken. I can't have sex. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough partner. I'm not a good enough wife. I could, they're very negative. It's a very negative lens, isn't it? And, one of the things that, I'll often ask women that have this is like, where does this kind of negative lens come from? And actually it's like a magnifying glass of shame. It's the magnifying glass of somebody feeling shame, either about their bodies, about sex. It's often just a little belief that they've picked up along the way. And it's about letting go of those things and understanding their bodies and taking away that fear as well, that fear of pain. And, like we've said before, if we truly believe, or if we know, if we've had the experience of trying to do that, it's just painful, then, it's not something that we're going to want to repeat anytime soon. So, and this is why self-exploration, outside of kind of a sexual encounter, of understanding and getting that comfort and building up their own confidence that they can penetrate themselves with the finger or with the dilator, but in a context. And this is the thing, it's not about just kind of shoving your finger up there and seeing if, making sure that you can. It's about allowing yourself to be sensuous and noticing how juicy your body is and connecting in so that you can feel how pleasurable it is to be able to do that. And once you start to experience that, and that's where dilators then come in, where the mindset has changed, the shame has gone. A woman's able to experience that in a sensual, sexual way, so that they can feel that they're lubricating, they can feel that their muscles are relaxing, and they know that they're doing that, they're causing that, their body's causing that. It's not about somebody else causing that for them. Then that's truly empowering, because then you can move that into where you're sharing that space with somebody else. But we have to be able to do it with ourselves first.
So I have two more questions before we wrap up this particular podcast. The two of them, I'll list them right in a row so that you can just decide which one you're going to answer first. But the first one was from a friend of mine, and that was, is there any connection between autism and vaginismus? For example, is it more common with autistic folk? Do you know anything about this? I don't know of any correlation. I would Google it, but I don't have personal information on that. And the last one is, what advice would you have for a man who is married to a woman who has vaginismus?
Okay. So let's take the first question first. Funnily enough, being the first question, the answer to that is I don't know in relation specifically to vaginismus and autism. I do know that the incidence of sexual dysfunction or is higher within the autism community or with autistic people. But that doesn't mean that everybody that's on that kind of spectrum has issues. So in terms of, does it make vaginismus more common? The honest answer is I don't know. I truly don't know. I could see how it might, but I don't know. I don't know if there's any studies that have ever been done about that. It would be certainly interesting to have a look.
We'll have to look at that after this. But
Absolutely.
I don't think it's caused, like, there's no direct thing saying, well, autism is a precursor for vaginismus.
Not at all.
No.
And often, and again, this is, just taking one aspect of autism that some people have and not everybody has, but in terms of things like social anxiety, so it may not be that, it may be that people just don't engage as much because of the prevalence of social anxiety with people that have autism. That doesn't mean that all people that have autism have social anxiety, but that may be a factor, because obviously when we're looking to connect and have relationships, that can be an issue. But vaginismus specifically, I have absolutely no idea. In terms of advice for men that are in a relationship with or are married to a woman that has vaginismus, I think encouragement to kind of, first of all, make sure that there isn't anything going on that needs checking out, and then kind of a lot of tenderness, a lot of patience, understanding that it's not them. The fear doesn't come from them. I think
right, that's a big one.
That, well, what, but I would never hurt her. I have had partners, I would never hurt her, I don't understand. And it's like, it's not about you, it's just about, it's this kind of fear of pain, and sometimes the fear of failure as well. If you're anxious about something and you have this kind of idea in your mind that something won't work, and to kind of, to be, most of the men that that I work with that are supporting their partners, I guess they're their partner because they are supportive, and that's why they're there. Reassurance, I'm not going to leave you, and also to kind of help her, to encourage her to explore. So it might be things like, I have one lovely man who would run his partner a bath, for example, so that she could explore. And it kind of took the shame away. She had a lot of issues around sex and masturbation, for example. So he would run her a bath and, would kind of set up the scene for her to be able to self-explore, and then actually would graciously retreat, which I thought was lovely, because it was kind of saying, this is perfectly normal, wonderful, and natural. It's for you. Enjoy this. And, if you need me, I'm just out here. Which I thought actually was a really nice way of approaching it, rather than, let me help you, should I use my finger? That comes along the way, but actually just being supportive that, that he was treating her almost in a way that it was a bit like a goddess, really. It was really beautiful how he kind of went about that. So I think it's about being patient. It's knowing that it's not them. Knowing also that it doesn't matter how many other women they've slept with. This is the other thing. Nobody else has ever had this issue, because every person is different. Every relationship is different. And, making it very clear that they will stop. If you're kind of slowly overcoming this, is that they will stop should they be told to stop. So, and they will be okay with that. And that's the other thing, is a lot of women that have this will not engage, not because they think their partner won't stop, but because they'll think their partner will be upset if they're asked to, which is a very different thing.
Yeah, I was going to say, to have an automatic go-to when you have to stop. So let's just say, imagine you actually do get to the point where she's considering penetration, or whether you do get to have penetration even momentarily, or you start and you're very aroused and she needs you to stop seamlessly and without awkwardness and without any hint of pouting or, okay, well, I guess we'll go to this. I guess I'll just manually release. None of that. Just have it seamlessly as if, hey, this is completely normal. And it's not taking away from our lovemaking to shift into something else.
Absolutely. And that thing can often be the thing for her.
Yeah.
You know, I think that, you know, that's the thing. It's not about, you know, them not being able to finish or not being able to penetrate. Sometimes it's about, well, don't worry, you know, don't worry. I'll do this to you instead. What I want to do is give you pleasure. It's not about me being disappointed.
Yeah.
You know, so it could be, you know, it could be a manual thing. It could be an oral thing. It could be a cuddling thing, you know, and then something else starts off. Sometimes it might be that you need to pause and, you know, and reassurance as well, you know, some reassurance.
Pauses are okay.
Yeah.
They really are okay. This was extremely informative. Kaz, this was extremely informative, and I can't thank you enough for joining me on this podcast. Were there any parting statements that you had for our listeners?
I think with Vaginismus, know that you're not alone. You know, it's not just you. It's not as rare as you maybe have been led to believe. But, and I think this is the key, is that there is hope. And just because you have it doesn't mean that you will always have it. There are lots of things that you can do to get over it. And that doesn't mean that it makes sex bearable. I mean, so that it makes sex and penetration enjoyable. And, you know, so that you can do all the other things that we just assume that we can do as women, like use tampons. So, you know, live in possibility. And, you know, there is hope. There is hope for this. It's not the catastrophe that perhaps it seems if you're experiencing this right now.